Welcome to SVCH Talks, where innovation meets inspiration and every conversation sparks transformation. Here we unlock the future, share cutting edge insights, and empower you to lead the way in a world driven by knowledge and discovery. Let's elevate together, because the next breakthrough starts here.
We're thrilled to have you join us for a day filled with insightful discussions, groundbreaking innovation, and transformative learning. Today, you'll have the unique opportunity to hear from industry leaders as they share their expertise, experiences, and best practices. Before we move forward, remember that you can obtain the micro-credential for this event. Just follow the instructions on our website. Don't miss this chance to certify your participation and learning. Now we're ready to start. Let's dive into the broadcast that our team has prepared for you. Enjoy it.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this amazing webinar. And today we have a special guest to start the year, this 2026, with a lot of good news and a lot of things happening. But, well, today we have Jeremy Korst with us, bringing executive level insights from his work leading AI and transformation programs at Microsoft and T-Mobile. He's also co-author of the Wharton School Annual Enterprise AI Adoption Report, regular contributor to Harvard Business Review, and founder of Mindspan Labs. So, Jeremy, how are you?
Hey, so far so good. Good morning, Alejandro. Probably good afternoon to some of the people on the stream.
Good. So how is everything going? Like, what do we expect from this session? Just a little bit.
Well, as I turn from my holiday break vibe coding efforts to get back to business, we'll talk about today just some of the learnings we've had around AI adoption in organizations. Some of the things are going well, some of the things that where we're seeing struggles, and hopefully be able to provide some insight to what's happening more broadly, but also maybe some learnings that people can take back into their own roles and organizations to advance the appropriate use of this technology to make their companies and lives better.
Amazing. Good. Just a quick question before starting with the great presentation that you prepare. If you can tell us a little bit about like Mindspan Labs, like what the
Mindspan Labs, exactly as I give you, it'll be part of the presentation, not maybe explicitly, but that's really what Mindspan is about. It's about working with leaders who are understanding the imperative to strategically adopt this technology to advance their strategies, better serve their customers, better enable their workforces, but are struggling often, not necessarily because of the technology, although we all know there are some technology challenges as well, but more around strategy and people and processes. So as I was really digging into this world, I saw that clear gap. And so Mindspan is really the idea to how can we work both with clients, but just more broadly as a community, like we're doing today, to make sure that people are being able to understand some of the best practices, share knowledge, etc., so we can all move forward together.
Amazing. Good. So excited to see your presentation. I will let's go to the presentation. By the way, everybody, if you have some questions or comments, feel free to write it in whatever platform that you are using. And on the way, Jeremy can be answering like all those questions or doubts. Good. Let's go with the presentation. Thank you, Jeremy. I'll be here.
Yeah. All right. So thanks again for being master of ceremonies and for having me here. But it's a pleasure to be here. we're going to talk, like I said, about how some companies are unlocking value with AI, where there's some struggles, and we're going to base a lot of this on the insights we've seen from the Wharton AI adoption study, which I'll share some of those today. A bit about me, Alejandro gave some of this background, but I'm later in my career now, and it's given me the opportunity to see from a vantage point a variety of different technology companies, from some of the world's largest, Microsoft. I had the pleasure of and honor of launching Windows 10 globally, running several business units at T-Mobile, and then more recently in the smaller company space, Avalara, which was a pre-IPO company, Ilaria, which is a early stage cybersecurity company. We're all operators. So I've been had the vantage point of working with a variety of companies and brands. I've seen them work at the interface of launching new products, adopting new technology, and making them successful in market. I always like to put the picture of there's more to me than work. I love the outdoors. I live here in the Seattle area, so I get a lot of opportunities to hike and fish with my family, and so that's a little bit more of beyond the boardroom for me. Alejandro mentioned this, but also more recently, as I've reflected on my career and my experiences, I've had just a desire to give back, not only give back, but just engage in conversation around what drives effective technology adoption. How should brands engage both on the B2B side and the B2B side with the market effectively? And looking at best practices, some of my opinions of that too. So I've had the pleasure of being able to contribute to Harvard Business Review. My latest article is not here; it just came out in December. Also about the use of AI in marketing, in particular, and then also lecture at several business schools on the topic of AI strategy, both at my alma mater, the Wharton School, but also at Columbia Business School, USC Marshall, and then here locally at the Foster School at the University of Washington. So I get the opportunity to both present some of my thoughts and learnings and experiences, but also get a lot of feedback as part of that from students and executives and others. So like I said at the beginning of this, please share your thoughts, questions, etc. as we go through, because I think that this is a very quickly advancing space, and we're all kind of learning it together. Jumping right in, 3 years ago, I had the idea, we were seeing all these headlines of the launch of ChatGPT, all kinds of conversations we were having about what was going to happen, who was going to adopt, how organizations would adopt AI. And so I was talking to a colleague, Stefano Pontoni from the Wharton School, and we came up with ideas like, well, why don't we just start studying this? And so we did. And so we're now in our third year of, I think, is the largest and longest and study of enterprise AI adoption. This year, Sunny Tamby, also from the Wharton School, joined us as our third co-author. And so we got picked up in the news a lot about some of this stuff. We'll cover it here, but I think some really interesting findings. By the way, this is freely available. We can provide the link afterwards. You can go to the Wharton School and Knowledge at Wharton and search for it. So there's almost a 100-page report, which we're not going to present all of it today. But if you're interested in learning more, freely available, let us know. Reach out on LinkedIn. We make sure you get the link if you don't already have it. Just for those who are wondering, well, what is the study? Like I said, it's a 3-year program now, and what we're focused on is business leaders' use and perceptions of AI. So we're focused very much on larger company business leaders, because we thought that was really important to look at, since they are the ones that are often making decisions around budget and vendors and how their teams adopt technology. And so we have a variety of businesses and industries represented across a variety of functions, which you will see in here as well, and a pretty large sample that we've been able to put together over the course of the 3 years. So that's the way the study is collected, to give you some background on some of the findings. And so we split the study into 3 areas this year. One is around everyday AI, and we'll show you I'll show you some data on this. And this is really about, not surprising, you're probably seeing it, you're seeing the headlines, but the Gen AI usage has become mainstream. And moreover, business leaders are using it daily, overwhelmingly. And so, some of the challenges, some of the things we're seeing is not necessarily who's using it, but it's more around why are they using it, how are they using it. Maybe important too, there's still some people who aren't using it, and so what's causing them, to have some of the perceptions or adoption challenges that they're seeing. And so diving into some of the data here, what this shows is the 3-year adoption rate by company function for business leaders in these functions. And so again, maybe not surprisingly, we've seen pretty rapid growth across functions over the course of our 3-year study. And some of the things that I think kind of came out to me in our studies is, maybe not surprisingly that IT is leading the way in this and has over the course of our study. But one of the functions I've spent a bunch of my career in around marketing and sales is actually a laggard. And this is one of the ones I love to ask questions if people have insights or have seen similar things in their organizations. And by the way, this is leaders within this function, not necessarily the people actually, the managers and the people doing the real work. This is around leaders. And some of the feedback we've gotten is that marketing in particular and sales has really had an inundation of new technology over the last 10 years. The advent of customer data analytics, much more analytical rigor, statistical rigor, and technology, both on the marketing side and the technology side, that perhaps there's a bit of resistance to the next big change and maybe a wait and see attitude around that. At the same time, we're seeing a lot of people like McKinsey and others predict that marketing and sales may be one of the functions that will be most impacted and drive some of the most value with AI. So we've got a bit of tension here, and we'll see how it plays out over the coming years. I guess the other one I would point out here too, that we saw one of the largest jumps between 2023 and 2024, and is now second only to IT, is procurement. And originally, when we saw those data, we thought, what's going on there? And then suddenly it dawned on us, particularly as we started talking to people, procurement is adopting this technology very rapidly, not only for their own use, but they've got so many business partners within their organizations and vendors who are calling on the organization trying to sell them AI tools, that they're having to quickly become more familiar with this as a technology so that they can help decide and negotiate those deals. So that's around the basics of the rapid daily adoption, what we saw in the first year being more monthly and weekly adoption, to now almost a normal daily adoption for nearly half of business leaders that we surveyed. What are we seeing around use cases? Well, around use cases, what we're seeing is a lot of, over the course of the last few years, is a lot of what we call like horizontal productivity type applications. Things that are around the typical document summarization, email creation, desk research, all of those things that are interesting, but perhaps don't actually justify the billions of dollars of investments that organizations are making in this. Oh, interesting. I see that. Hey, Kevin, it's been a while. Thanks for joining. Intel is outsourcing 100% of marketing, and Accenture. Let's see how that works. That is an interesting data point. There'll be a good test case for the rest of us, I guess, to watch. Hope you're doing well, Kevin. But what I was getting into here is that some of these horizontal just productivity applications probably aren't significant enough to justify the type of ROI or the type of investment that organizations are making. So there is a yearning we're seeing for more vertical, more specialized applications, more value creation out of this, and we expect to see this in the coming year. In fact, in this year's survey, nearly half of the technology budget that organizations reported spending was a third, 33%, about 33% was in internal R&D. So, which gives some indication that companies are investing heavily in trying to customize and create, perhaps more specialized use cases for this. But we do see some other things popping up now that are perhaps more interesting and more value oriented. Look at idea generation and brainstorming. Fifth this year, +9 versus last year. So actually starting to we're seeing this across functions, whether it's engineering and product, doing ideation, whether it's around marketing and sales, doing content generation, etc. It's becoming a more facile tool for perhaps more interesting use cases. But then, like I mentioned, we're spending billions of dollars on this technology. Let's see that in my experience, where do they under? I think that that's been my experience too, even when I've been in charge of or been responsible for both sales and marketing. My hope is that AI can help us bring some of that together. We will see, but I agree with your experiences. But getting back to the proving the actual value of this massive investment, this year we decided to add, just be more explicit. This is the third year that we had been researching, and so now that we've talked about predictions, what type of ROI? By the way, we were in the middle of our study when MIT published their perhaps somewhat questionable methodology, but nonetheless headline-grabbing approach to saying that 95% of AI initiatives fail. So that was in the midst of our study. Our study wasn't a reaction to that; it just happened to be coincidental. But nonetheless, we found some interesting things from leaders about their perceptions of AI. And so one of the things we asked them is, as leaders, is your organization, how are you measuring ROI? Is it from one end of the spectrum, fully integrated, strategic, and continually optimized, or is it not measured at all? And I'm just curious, we don't have to do a poll here, but have it in your mind, what do you think the shape of this perhaps bar is going to be? To be honest with you, that I think my other study co-authors were a bit surprised at how many leaders said that they are measuring to some structured extent the return that they're getting on ROI. Now, I will tell you, we asked this question a bit broadly, intentionally. We wanted leaders to be able to define ROI in their own terms versus perhaps quantifiable financial metrics, because we know from talking with a lot of industry participants that some of those hard financial actual impacts are hard to find right now. And perhaps that's not surprising given the nascence of this technology, early adoption. Yet the important thing that I think our study found was that the perception of leaders were that they were measuring it, and moreover, that it was actually coming up with ROI. Look at this. Overall, organizations reported that overwhelmingly a moderately to significantly positive ROI for their initial investments. So quite a bit different, perhaps, than some of the other headlines around the failures of AI. And why we think this is important is because the budget decision makers, the leaders of these organizations, have perceptions of at least that they are measuring it and that there is at least initial ROI to be had. That they also report the desire to continue to invest in the technology and even increase budgets in many cases. And so that's really what we're trying to get at, is that in these early days, while perhaps financially measurable ROI may still be nascent or difficult, what's on the minds of leaders as they consider their various investments? And then we also took a look at this from just a different organizational size too. And what we see here is quite a material difference in reported positive ROI. We see the two middle bars are smaller enterprise and then mid-sized enterprise, so organizations of about 50 million a year to 2 billion a year, who are the ones that are more dramatically reporting moderately to significantly positive ROI, while larger organizations are behind. They're seeing less so. And I'm just curious, if others have some anecdotes or questions around this, for those of us who have lived in large organizations, or perhaps those of us who work with or serve large organizations, I think we know that they tend to take longer, through the large, complex organizations and bureaucracy and realistic concerns like governance and data security and industry regulation, et cetera, that they tend to adopt less quickly because of many of those frictions. But they also, studies would show that once they do adopt, start getting some of the more massive scale effects of the adoption too. It may be interesting too to know that over the first 2 years of our study, larger organizations reported slower adoption compared to these other two middle tiers. So we saw that these small and mid-sized organizations, as is typical, were early front runners in the adoption of Gen AI, and large organization enterprise reported actually catching up this year, but yet they're a little bit behind, perhaps still in other measures. So something to think about based on what type of organization you're working with or working for, how it lays out, compared to these other things. It's a question here, Stephen, good question. There's still too much marketplace noise and speaking facts, not fictions. I find a high percentage of executives saying they want AI, Gen AI, when they really need workflow automation. You'll see later from my perspective, Stephen, is I very much directionally agree with you, is that I think I should have put in the cartoon that I often put in my MBA lectures, which is, many of you probably seen on LinkedIn, which is the cartoon of who are we, CEOs, what do we want, AI, when do we want it, now, what do we want it to do, we don't know. And I think that while it's a funny cartoon, I think that there is a lot to say about that. And in fact, you'll see this, perhaps you kind of helped introduce this slide here, is that different seniorities we see when we separate out those who are VP plus, so executive management, versus middle management. Those who are closer to the actual execution, perhaps accountable for the day-to-day and seeing in the trenches what's actually happening. A pretty big delta between their perceptions of ROI. 69% of middle managers are reporting positive ROI, while as over 80% of executives are. So this is a prelude to some of the things about some of the disconnects. Stephen, you're hitting on one of them that I agree with. Here's another perspective about how there may need to be how there is perhaps some variance of perspective, some variance of strategy and tactics that I think is really important for organizations to come to grasp with and really understand what they're trying to achieve, like you said, around workflow automation, versus just having a hammer and using, looking for any nail they can find. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a bit. But look at this gap. And this is only one of the gaps we've seen like this, which I'll show you some more, coming out here in the other slides. But then we get into the human capital lever. And Assad, I hope things are going well in New York, assuming you're there right now. And I agree with that too. I think what Stephen's point was that, trying to split the middle between this two is, let's just not assume that AI is our be-all, end-all tool for everything. And so I think it's more of like, we have now a major tool in our tool bag, something we didn't have before. That's super powerful, can be applied to a lot of different type of things. But even in automation, for example, is that this is a non-deterministic probabilistic system. And so there's a lot of work going on to put guardrails, other types of things involved in agentic workflows and workflow automation, but yet we still need to be able to be comfortable with the uncertainty and level of variation that we should expect from a tool like this. And so that's where I think it comes up to leaders to make decisions about, what am I trying to automate? What workflow am I trying to reproduce or automate? And what is the best tool for that? And in some cases, it may be keep it simple, stupid. In other cases, it may be machine learning. In other cases, it may be Gen AI. But those are the types of things I think leaders need to grapple with, versus just jumping right into assuming that AI is the answer, which I think is causing, by the way, some of the challenges we're seeing and some of the failed experimentation and pilots that are going on. But this gets down to the human capital level, around how are we engaging, how are we as leaders, how are organizations engaging through and leveraging their human capital as we look to adopt this powerful new technology and use it in different ways. And here are some of the things that we found over the years. Again, a lot more about this in the full report available at Knowledge at Wharton. And like I said, I will repost a link to that report somewhere on the LinkedIn post or something once we get through this to make sure everybody has access to it. But one of the things we wanted to look into, and in fact, my frequent HBR co-author friend and co-author of this study, Stefano Puntoni, is a world-renowned academic thought leader in the area of the intersections of human and technology. And so we say his time has come with the advent of AI, because that's exactly what we're talking about, is that intersection between humans and technology. A technology that is seemingly becoming maybe not more human, but at least having more human-like capabilities, and at the same time, people trying to adopt and adapt to that situation. And so one of the things we wanted to look at over the course of the study is leaders' perspective of this technology vis-a-vis and related to the impact of their employees' skills. Okay, so first of all, we looked, and I should say, by the way, Assad, who asked an earlier question, is actually one of the analysts on this report. So I want to thank him and acknowledge him for all of his great work on this too. When we look at these two areas, one is enhancing employees' skills in some tasks versus replacing employees' skills in some tasks. Now, you will note that these don't add to 100. This isn't either or. This is rather asking, what do you think will happen? And you can see by the numbers, many leaders believe it's going to be both. But what we've seen is overwhelmingly over the course of the study, and a huge increase even from 2003 to 2024, of managers and leaders believing that AI is going to enhance employees' skills, while about 2/3 of them have consistently told us that they expect it to replace. Just curious, we don't have a formal poll, but you can just guess for yourself as what do you think happened in 2025? How did this change? There's been a lot of advancement, a lot of adoption, a lot of experimentation, both failed experimentation and positive experimentation. Where did we land? Well, actually, not much change. So it's pretty interesting, I think, here is that even though we are where we're at in the adoption cycle, both the hype and the reality is senior leaders, at least, have been fairly consistent in their perspective of the impact of their employees' skills, both the combination of whether they enhance and they replace them. But this year, we also wanted to add, we didn't ask this in earlier versions of the study, but we decided to add this year is what about skill atrophy? So what about the worry? Because we understand there's going to enhance certain skills versus replace certain skills. What about the worry of atrophy skills? And here's what we saw this year. And again, we didn't ask this in 23 and 24. But you see over 40% of leaders acknowledged that they believe, or they're at least concerned about declines in its employees' skill proficiency in some areas. Now we'll see what happens next year around this. But what I take away from this again is again a leadership challenge, is thinking through strategically. AI is a tool that is very powerful and it can do a lot of things. But for my organization, there's got to be a Goldilocks type answer of what skills do I want to make sure that I do leverage the technology to enhance and augment and do as such, versus what skills am I okay replacing? And this is where it's like good skills to replace and bad skills to replace. And I think this is what leaders are often struggling with now today, and I believe is going to be a huge topic for 2026. So that versus what the technology can do versus what it should do, because those strategically differentiated skills, those important core skills within a given function, or within a given function within a given organization, this may have difference between organizations, and definitely with between different types of functions. And so I think this is again one of the leadership imperatives that the human capital lever is really important to help companies navigate this side. And I think back, I often get particularly when I speak at business schools or undergraduate, people who are, and maybe some folks on the line, who are looking into their career and the career ahead of them, and not surprisingly and understandably worried about certain aspects of how AI will impact not only the workforce but their chosen profession. And I think it's right for all of us to be aware of that, concerned about that, try to influence that, and prepare for that. But I will say, over the course of my long career, there are quite a few skills that were not value added that I would have been very happy, and that took a lot of my time, that were more administrative, were more process oriented, that I sure would have been happy to give up to be able to focus on some of the more strategic and people oriented parts of my job. So I hope that's where we can continue to move in this spectrum to be able to achieve outcomes like that. But then, of course, there's the question of jobs. Like I said, what's going to happen with Gen AI? Are there going to be more jobs? Are there going to be fewer jobs? Are there going to be fewer entry-level jobs, mid-managers? Or is it going to create new jobs? Those things are all, what I'd say is the jury is out. I think that I can confidently say and bet that there will be roles and functions and organizations that feel pretty dramatic impact due to the adoption and capabilities of AI. I'm also personally pretty bullish that there are new opportunities for company growth and role growth that will take advantage of this technology to create new opportunities both for both their organizations, their customers, and their employees. And again, a leadership imperative, I believe, in navigating this is to really pick a path. For example, the outgoing CEO of Walmart, I thought had a really interesting public statement about their AI vision. Their AI vision was really about growth, and that when he was asked whether he expected it to impact their workforce, he said, well, he believes that every job is going to be impacted by AI, and at the margin there may be some, I'm paraphrasing, but at the margin there may be some roles and functions they're negatively impacted by headcount. But overall, he believes that if Walmart is successful through this, that Walmart will grow so quickly that they will end up having more employees, not fewer, at the other side of this river. And so I think that type of vision, if it's right for a company, is important to help and be able to navigate, again, this space. But where we ask people overall right here to say, what do they believe the impact of jobs will be in the next 2 to 5 years? What you see is this mixed bag. The jury's out. About 13 to 18% say fewer junior to mid-level hires. And then on the other side of the equation, the other side of the balance sheet, we see senior leaders saying that 40 to 49% of them predict more junior to mid-level hires. So again, I think it's going to be a mixed bag, and we're going to see how the jury's out. We're going to see how this goes, but I was a bit surprised at the bullishness of this. I expected, to be honest, if I would have made a bet before the survey that the light blue would have been bigger based on the headlines that I had seen at the time. But when we started looking at this and talking to leaders, both through the study and outside the study, and by the way, McKinsey found some similar directional evidence in one of their recent surveys about the difference between leaders who thought there'd be fewer versus more jobs. So anyways, jury's out. I think particularly those of us who are leaders, who will be leaders, who are aspiring leaders on the call, it's up to us, I think, to help our teams and our organizations navigate this, so that there's not undesired impact, perhaps, on our workforce. It's hard to see the headline here on this slide. Take a look at this really quickly. Great, thanks for the share. We'll have to take a look at that. And we'll see how this, by the way, we will see how this what happens to this, both in actual market evidence, but also in the survey as we go into 2026 and 2027 rounds as well. So here's another interesting, going back to, I said there's some data points showing that perhaps there's some tension or at least lack of being on the same page between executive management, VP plus, and mid managers. And what we see, one of the questions we've asked over the years, we're just showing this year's here in this slice, is it for your organization, do you think that you are, how do you believe your organization is adopting AI relative to other organizations like you? And what you see here is a pretty profound difference between executive managers, executive leaders who are saying that their organization is more rapidly adopting the technology compared to peers and organizations like them versus mid managers. And so where's the reality? Is it in the ground truth around mid managers who are doing this every day, and perhaps seeing some of the pain in the trenches of some of the challenges of the early technology and the fit and the experimentation, and perhaps being even worried about the impact of themselves and their teams, or perhaps the more aspirational executives that maybe have a longer time horizon as they're really thinking about ROI and they're really thinking about adoption, and so they have a more bullish outlook. It's hard. In fact, it's impossible to get inside all of their minds. But what this really shows, again, I will repeat, is the need for clarified strategy, clarified leadership, and to make sure that these two groups get more on the same page around the impact, adoption, and other key aspects of their AI journey. So another area of human capital that we've been looking into over time is around talent pipeline. And here you can see, and some of this has been consistent over the course of the study, is that, of course, AI talent, this AI native talent, whatever that means, because I think that's a changing target by the day. But nonetheless, those who have AI native and AI capabilities are in high demand. But what I want to point out here on this slide is that we're also seeing, some other impacts when we ask leaders around your view, what are the biggest challenges your organizations face as it comes to adapting your talent pipeline? And look at things like, even though it's red because it's within this, it's further away from 49 than the others, but 41% of respondents in this survey saying having leadership that can effectively lead change management is one of the biggest challenges their organization face. And to me, that's just another data point in the constellation of evidence that we've seen on some of these other points around some of the adoption friction we're seeing being more around strategic management and change management and leadership than it is necessarily just or only about the technology itself. And look at the other areas in here too. There's other points that also play into that same theme around maintaining employee morale, ensuring existing employees engage in continuous learning. These are not AI skills. These are leadership skills. By the way, I saw a lot of chatter over the holidays as I was paying a little bit more close. I had more time to, as I was vibe coding, to pay attention to LinkedIn and to X, with some of the thought leaders around, as we have this rise of agentic AI, which was just nascent at the time of our latest survey. We expect to see a lot more of that in the coming year. But talking about around, well, what happens in this coming hybrid workforce where we introduce AI agents, autonomous agents, to perhaps do some fairly high value business processes and workflows, and perhaps some that even impact customers directly. In those, what type of leadership capabilities? Of course, it's going to take all kinds of IT data security and privacy and guardrails and advancements from the underlying labs and the models. All those technology aspects are super important and critical. But when we think, I think, more holistically around what type of leadership, what type of organization change management is it going to take to be able to manage that way? And I thought it was some really interesting commentary over the the holiday. In fact, Ethan Mollick from the Wharton School had some commentary on this along the lines of, hey, some of the challenges that people are seeing in adopting agents, early adopters, around providing clear instructions, guardrails, adapting to true business process, etc. I think he made essentially the point of, that's not an AI specific challenge or thing. That's just leadership and management. And so I think that's just an important point I'm trying to land here, is that some of these things are important, even though the technology is unique, exciting, and different. Some of the skills required for us to navigate the space are the same as they have been in the last couple decades. And the importance to make sure that we're hiring and developing leaders within the organization who can help us achieve that. And speaking of leadership, we're seeing more and more companies now who are having chief AI officers. And so, we saw this last year, crop up. We're seeing it, more so this year. And one of the things I want, a couple of things I want to talk around CAIOs, based on what we're seeing is, one is that what we're seeing actually happen based on the survey of these leaders is that there's a number of CAIO roles, but over half are just additions. They're a comma with to the title, that somebody is getting a CAIO as part of their broader responsibilities and accountabilities. And perhaps not surprising, as this is now a board level issue. It's a CEO level issue. So of course the board and the CEO want to make sure that there's an accountable executive in the organization who has who can be not necessarily directly in charge of all the company's initiatives in this space, but at least have visibility and accountability to report them back to the rest of the organization. So, seeing this develop here too. I think, what some of the best practices in this is not necessarily a technology role per se. It's not necessarily something that should live under the CIO or CTO. I'm not saying that's a black and white best practice. They're saying that companies should make sure to consider that, because going back to some of the conversation we had a bit earlier around workflows and automation and et cetera, a bunch of this comes down to actually implementing and adopting effectively in a cross-functional, multi-dimensional model that includes, the acknowledgement and understanding of business strategy, the impact of human capital. And so I think, to me, and I think we've seen some organizations who are doing this well, is this is a role that is highly cross-discipline. So it's somebody who most definitely needs to understand, appreciate, and have technology skills. I think that's super important. That goes almost without saying. But moreover, while that's a critical capability, I think those who have been in the business and perhaps in different parts of functions across the business that give them more insight across function, across the business, may be better attuned to be able to serve and drive roles like this. Again, not a one size fits all, but more of an opinionated commentary as organizations begin to adopt this role as the type of skills that may be necessary to be successful there. And by the way, personally, I think a really exciting role for those who are currently in role, most definitely exciting and exhilarating, and probably also stressful at times. But also for those earlier in the career that are thinking, or mid-career, are thinking about what is the impact of AI and where do I want to drive my career. A pretty interesting opportunity, I think, both at the CAIO level and also within the staff of this person. So bringing it back to some of what we're talking about, Mindspan Labs. We've talked about this earlier in the presentation, and to reinforce it now. What we're seeing is there's three organizational realities that are happening here. You see that overwhelmingly, 2/3 almost of executives VP plus are excited about the strategy ahead and the opportunity ahead. They believe there's positive ROI now. Middle management, like we said, are more cautious, maybe more pragmatic, some would say, maybe closer to the actual things that are going on. And then moreover, what I didn't introduce earlier because it wasn't in our study, but I'm borrowing data from Pew, the Pew organization had a workforce AI survey, which is, again, publicly available if anybody's interested in looking at it, showing the impact of workers and how worried workers are. So look at the tension we have here. And for organizations who are hoping to successfully adopt this technology, just to hit this over the nail on the head again, that this is not just about having the effective use of technology. Somehow, we need to bring these groups and bring them along and make sure that we are communicating throughout an organization and across function a common vision and a common aspiration, perhaps, and a common path as soon as we can to help bring these other key constituencies along. Or else we're probably going to continue to have friction and unnecessary lack of success in some of our earlier efforts. Like Ian Y said, is like the transmission mechanism is failing, is what we're seeing so far. And BCG, I thought, had a really good model in one of their reports that I modified some, but I'm going to give them credit because I think that they hit most of this on the head. And it's about the 70% iceberg. Is a lot of the initial adoption has been more technologically driven and focus on things like hallucinations and around the algorithm, or the availability and quality of data around security and governance, etc. I don't want to minimize those things. Those things are all absolutely essential. And I think we've got people in most organizations that understand a lot of that, are on top of that, and there's a lot left to do to get that right. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. The rest of the iceberg is what we've been talking about through a lot of this call, and what we've learned throughout the course of the studies of the last 3 years of adoption, and what other organizations are seeing, like BCG and McKinsey and others, is that what actually drives success are things like strategic clarity. Where do we want AI to create value? And even if we don't know specifically yet, what type of things are we going to look for it to create value? How much is going to be efficiency? How much is going to be growth? How much of the efficiency that we gain is going to be reinvested into growth? Those types of visions for this. People and skills. Do we have the right capabilities? And by the way, not just technological capabilities, like we said. I think it's important for all leaders and all the workforce to be experimenting with LLMs, with generative AI. I think that it is important for us all to keep abreast of this as it gets better every single day, and that's important. But beyond that, what are the skills around leadership, change management, strategy, workflow reimagination? Not only workflow automation, but workflow reimagination, etc. Organizational processes, culture and mindset, leadership and change management. That is the real iceberg that we need to make sure that we are at least focused on acknowledging, acquiring skills, developing skills to be able to ensure that aspirational ROI and the hundreds of billions of dollars that are being invested in this space do end up paying off. And so what are the fundamentals? Kind of wrapping this all up, and we'll have about 10 minutes for additional conversation and questions. So I'd love to hear feedback. I'd love to hear examples if anybody has either different examples or examples that help color this. But overall, I'd say AI is not a strategy. I'm using those terms specifically. The company needs to have a strategy. That strategy isn't changed by AI per se. Rather, AI is an extremely important tool and tactic to achieve that strategy. It's more, how do I use AI to achieve that strategy and accelerate that strategy, not an AI strategy. So I know I'm being semantic here, but I think the difference is really, really important as we think about how to successfully adopt the technology. Like I've said throughout this, it's not just about tech and tools, it's about transformation. It's about people, process, and technology. It requires the combination of the top-down vision, the top-down sponsorship, but we need the bottoms-up embrace. If we don't find a way to help workers overcome some of their fears. Well, of course, not we need to be truthful in the cases where we do believe that AI is going to impact certain jobs, certain people, certain roles. But how do we ensure that we have an effective vision? How better we understand we have an exciting strategy along with an AI vision that creates a situation and a culture that has this bottoms up embrace, that enables a type of experimentation and adoption that needs to occur, I think, to be able to long term be successful in this space. And the trust, like I said in the bullet point there, that is going to be required to cross this chasm, borrowing a term from Jeffrey Moore. There's a major skill gaps that we see there, but transformational leadership capabilities, and I should also put on this things about business process reimagination are going to be key. And by the way, this first phase we've been is essentially what we call bringing AI to work. Bringing AI to work. And what people I hear mean by that is that it's more of like in our existing business processes, my existing workflow, my existing emails and report creation and my day-to-day job. How can I use a helpful chat agent or some level of automation to augment my existing processes? And that's interesting. That can be very powerful in many cases. But I think to really gain the type of transformational ROI that people are expecting and anticipating, it's going to be not just bringing AI to work, but putting AI to work. Putting AI to work in new ways, rethinking business processes across the organization, perhaps even reimagining organizations themselves to be able to work in this new hybrid world. Early measurable ROI is elusive, even though our study showed that there's positive perceptions of that and early reported of that. I know working with actual clients and colleagues that when it comes to truly financially measurable ROI, it's still elusive. There's early indications of really positive of things there, but I think that just reinforces the need for intentional experimentation and measurable pilots, and then quickly scaling them and heralding them as successes once we see those early indications of value. And then last, to hit the gong on this a bunch through this, and I truly believe it, people are still the biggest lever. And I think they're going to be so for at least the foreseeable future, hopefully forever. But that how we engage with people, how do we skill people, how do we give them the culture of trusted experimentation, augmentation, tactical execution, et cetera, is going to be absolutely critical, I think, for companies to successfully adopt. So with that, it looks like we've got a bit of time for any additional chat here. This is, I'd love to connect on LinkedIn. I'd like to have back and forth as much as possible on LinkedIn, both learn more from you and do this. Like I said, the vision of Mindspan Labs, of course, if we're on a consulting firm and love to have clients, but really more over just engaging in the broader discussion as we all learn and as we all navigate this in the coming months and years ahead. So thanks for the time. Love to hear some additional questions or thoughts.
Jeremy, what an amazing presentation. Great insights. I'm really surprised and really happy also by all the bright future that we have for the junior analysts, like the interns, like the leadership that can can lead with change management. I think that overall there are like good news around there. Or what do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't trust me. I am not just wearing rose-colored glasses. I am also mindful that there are going to be impacts to people, to communities, to organizations that we need to acknowledge and hopefully minimize. That's my point. Is how do we embrace the hopefully largely positive and expansive aspects, and how do we as leaders within communities, within organizations, embrace that such that we can at least influence the outcome to be more positive than negative? That's really my perspective.
Makes total sense. And I just have like a question. We have just a couple of minutes, but about the CAIO, the CAIO positions that you mentioned that are like really interesting path for mid careers and for overall like new for people that wants to go there. But how do you see it will work, or what will be the what would be the main responsibilities, or like what's his role overall?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I think. But by the way, I think that when I first saw me and the authors and some of the analysts at GBK saw some of these results, we were a little surprised. So one of the first things we did is started looking at through LinkedIn is who's got titles of CAIO, and what are they saying their responsibilities are. And let's just say it's various right now. It's a wide spectrum of backgrounds and responsibilities. I know in talking with CEOs and leaders of various companies that it's not a standardly defined role today. I think that we will, over the course of coming months and years, there'll be more standards, a more standard role, for this. But to me, this is probably something that is more specific to each organization and what their vision and strategy is. And what is it that they need to achieve with AI across their organization, which is unique to their organization in most cases. And because of that, that's going to take a different type of skill set for that organization. I think if I was earlier in career, and I remember those great days, or mid-career, I think some of the advice I got around T-shaped experiences are pretty important. That is, like, how do I have experiences that give me breadth and insight across our different, a broad aperture of domains and functional experience, while making sure that I've got depth and strength within a core, whether that is technology or whether that is analytics or whether that's sales. And then I think those are the people, to me, that will be that somewhat more perhaps more inclined, more valuable, because of that type of experience set and skill set, to be in a role that is inherently a coordination and an influence role within the organization. This isn't a role that probably owns the entire AI budget. It's probably not a role that is dictating the use of AI, most likely. It's probably coming up with some standards of use within an organization, but is more of a coordination role in most cases.
Amazing. Yeah, totally agree. And by the way, I invite everybody to check our certification at Silicon Valley Certification Hub. We have the flagship, actually, is the Chief AI Officer program certification.
Well, there you go. I didn't even know I was helping you pitch that, but I definitely check it out.
Yeah, it looks like it was almost planned, but it wasn't. Amazing. So we have still some comments, some great work from. I don't know if you want to read it. Or...
Yeah, Anthony, it's like AI advances to become part of the organized strategy, similar to having people on the core strategy board. Maybe just making sure we understand each other too, is that if you say, is AI going to be part of the strategy process? Most definitely. It's already part of my strategy process. It's one of my best, strategic, maybe I'll even call it advisors. And I know that CEOs and boards that I have talked to are using it as a tool, just like they're having people on their strategy boards. My semantics, I was trying to really pound on around. I hear a lot of companies saying, "I need an AI strategy. I need an AI strategy." And to me, that sounds more like searching for what you want to be versus already knowing what you want to be and using AI to get there. That's kind of my point. But in terms of like its ability to be a strategic advisor, to bounce off ideas, to be able to really ask hard probing questions about what you think is a solid strategy, it's an amazing tool for that.
Agree. And well, a lot of thank you and congrats for your
Melissa,
insights.
good to see you. Thanks for joining and for the time.
Anthony,
Thanks,
Stephen,
Anthony.
Yeah, well, I think with those great comments, let's close this webinar. Let me share again your data. here. So if you want to follow him and connect with him, with Jeremy.
Thanks for having me, Alejandro. Thanks. I hope I wish everybody success in the new year. It's going to be a fun and exciting time, I know.
Yeah, totally. Well, thank you, Jeremy. Great insights, great presentation. We hope to see the next report, and hopefully we can have another session.
We kick off in just a couple months, so it's already getting ready.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Have a thank you everybody to attend the webinar, and see you later. Bye.